that today I'm here because we're not Democrats or Republicans. And
the steps that we have the control over, that we have the power to do, if we all are responsible and take actions like wearing masks, we have the ability to slow the spread of this virus. We have the power to save lives, and we can be in a better position to reinitiate those rivalries that are so important to us in Michigan. Wolverines versus Spartans. But please, now, I need everyone to step up and stand tall for Michigan. I need everybody to do the right thing and wear a mask. And now, again, I want to bring to the podium the winningest coach in Michigan Wolverines women's basketball history. The only coach in program history with 6 straight 20-win seasons. The University of Michigan women's basketball head coach, Kim Arico, here to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you, Governor Whitmer, for having me here today. It's truly an honor to be here. Like Susie, as a parent, a mom, a coach, the most important thing for me right now is the health and the safety and the well-being of my children, all of our children, our student athletes, and our community and our state of Michigan. Regardless of if we live in Ann Arbor, East Lansing, or Northern Michigan, we are in this fight together, in this fight for Michigan. We would love, and I have 3 children as well, we would love for schools to open. We would love for our universities to open. We would love to play those rivalry games that you talked about. But we can't do that. We can't do that without all of you. We can't do that without everyone in our state wearing their masks and protecting each other and doing it for the state of Michigan. Masks matter. I think we found that out recently. Please, everyone, mask up for Michigan. We can do this. Thank you. And thanks again.
Thanks, Coach Arico. And now I want to introduce someone who probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but we're going to honor him with a bit of one. In his 25 years as head coach at Michigan State University, Coach Tom Izzo has compiled, of course, an impressive list of accomplishments, including the 2000 NCAA National Championship, 10 regular season Big Ten championships, 6 Big Ten tournament titles, 8 Final Four appearances, 8 National Coach of the Year awards, and a Big Ten record of 22 straight NCAA tournament appearances. Please welcome Coach Tom Izzo.
Geez, that sounded a lot more impressive than I feel. But, you know, I too, honestly, I've never thought of myself in the political world. But when given this opportunity by our governor, I jumped at it. I just feel like, you know, what we've been through and all the opportunities that have come, we need to make better decisions than we've made. The rivalries are one thing, and we all joke about them, and we laugh about them. And I just did a thing with Juwan Howard the other night for TV. Dwayne Casey put together a thing to try to help people understand how important this is. And in football, men's basketball, women's basketball, so on, both schools have had great success. But the fight against COVID-19 is not... It's not for just Spartans, it's not for Wolverines, it's for everybody to come together. And that doesn't happen very often. We're all on the same page, we're rivals. But in this case, I love everyone in this state. You know, I've got to answer to 500,000 living alums, which isn't even close to what you got to answer to. But in doing that, I'm asking all the people in this great state, and I've lived here my entire life, to listen to the leadership. And you know, I thought about leading by example. I kind of hate the phrase, because lead by example means that, although there's some people that don't lead at all by example right now, that bothers me a lot. But leading by example means you do the right thing. I think as leaders, we have to bring people with us. We just can't expect that they're going to see what we're doing. We've got to bring them with us. And so, with that being said, I decided to step out like both Kim and Susie did and try to be difference makers. And sadly, as we've all seen over these last few months, this common opponent is a deadly opponent. And outside of this 3-month stint, I've been proud to live in this state for my entire life. But I have been a little disappointed how some of the Michiganders have handled some things lately. There's no task that we can't handle, especially when we tackle it together. So I'm asking everyone to join me in wearing a mask, us in wearing a mask. I love that the governor said this: I don't care what you put on your mask, just wear something on your face. That was awesome. I really respect that, and I'd rather you not wear that silly M, but if you got to do it, you got to do it. But, although if you want to wear a Spartan mask around a neighborhood when there's a 7-footer around, I'd appreciate that too. But in all seriousness, from all of us, the bottom line is, let's all mask up for Michigan and show this country, the state that really does work together and masks up together. So thank you for having me. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for having me. And let's mask up.
Thanks, Coach. Thank you. Thank you to all 3 of our coaches. Really appreciate all of you coming in and helping spread the word about how important it is that we all mask up. So with that, I think I'll be joined by Dr. Caldoun and Mark Burton, as well as the Lieutenant Governor. Got a number of things on our agenda. So we are at a turning point in our fight against COVID-19 in Michigan. Daily COVID-19 case counts now exceed 20 cases per million in Detroit, Kalamazoo, Saginaw, Jackson, and Upper Peninsula regions, and exceed 40 cases per million in Grand Rapids region. Research confirms that a big part of the reason is spotty compliance. That means that the requirement that people wear face masks is really important to get a handle on these numbers and to push these numbers down again. We've seen what can happen when people come together with face coverings, but we've also seen what can happen when people show up without a face covering. We have a choice to make. Do we double down and get more vigilant in our fight against this virus? Or do we let all of our hard work go to waste? All the hard work we've done over the past 4 months. Like I've said before, we got to be in the business of saving lives. That's what we're trying to do here. I'm working around the clock to ensure that the hard work we've done during this pandemic, that the hard work that made Michigan a national leader in our response to COVID-19 is not made in vain. So for the sake of our neighbors and for our loved ones and for our communities, for our heroes on the front line, for our kids who want to return to school in the fall, for our businesses that want to stay open or have the chance to open, it is incumbent on all Michiganders to do their part and to step up and mask up so that we can fight this virus. On Friday, I signed an executive order requiring mask use in all indoor public places. It also requires the use of face coverings in outdoor crowded spaces. It requires that any business that is open to the public refuse entry or service to people who refuse to wear a face covering, with limited exceptions. Because we know this, that wearing a mask, a simple act of a face covering, is one of the best tools that we have to fight this virus. A virus that is ravaging parts of our country right now and is growing here in Michigan. This isn't about vanity. It's not about comfort. It's about protecting our family and our friends and our loved ones from getting sick. Studies have shown that wearing a mask can save lives and significantly lower an individual's chance of spreading COVID-19. Masks can reduce the spread by about 70%. And by wearing masks now, we can put our state in a stronger position so our kids can return to school safely in the fall. I just want to look at this slide real quickly. You can see this is where we've been since March 10th, when our first 2 cases showed up, to where we are, to where we hope to be by September, when hopefully our kids are returning to school. You can see where we are now and what our trajectory is headed. If we don't do anything different right now and keep seeing our numbers climb, this is where we are headed. And as you can see, it'll be above where we were at the absolute worst time during COVID-19, or during the initial stay home, stay safe order. So this is what's at stake if we want to get our kids back in school and we want to keep our economy engaged. By wearing masks now, we can put our state in a stronger position. So the majority of Michigan schools are set to start on September 8th, with some even starting the week before. September 8th is only 55 days away. Now, for perspective, let's remember that 55 days with COVID-19 can dramatically show a huge increase or decrease, depending on what we all do. 55 days after we discussed our first cases of COVID-19 in Michigan, we went from 2 cases to 40,000 in that 55 days. More than 4,000 people died in that 55 days. That's all it took for COVID-19 to grow exponentially. If we let our guard down now, the next 55 days could look radically different than that initial outcome we had, or it could look a lot the same. Whether our kids get into school depends on what we do today. The heroes on the front lines of this crisis have gone without taking off their masks every single day, all day long. The nurses and doctors and child care workers and grocery store workers and utility workers. We owe it to them to do our part by simply wearing a mask when we're in public places, when we're out and about and there are crowds, when we're outside even. Even the president has started wearing a mask, and I'm grateful for that. That's why I wanted to highlight that. Wearing a mask can significantly help our economy. A study conducted by Goldman Sachs concluded that a federal mask mandate, that's if everyone in the nation had a mandate like we have in Michigan, like they adopted in Alabama today. If everyone had that, we could save the U.S. economy from taking a 5% hit to our GDP. That's massive. So if Michiganders don't mask up when we're going out in public, cases could rise and we could be forced to close down more of our businesses, including auto manufacturing plants that employ thousands of Michigan workers, jobs that our whole economy depends on. I've said it many times before, but a second wave of this virus could be absolutely devastating. So we can lower the chance of that second wave, or the breadth of it, or the intensity of it, by simply wearing a mask now. So speaking of small businesses, Mark Burton is here today to talk about the Michigan Small Business Restart Program. While businesses are reopening, the impacts of COVID-19 are still creating incredibly difficult situations for small business to overcome, from lost business and revenue to increased costs associated with providing adequate safety measures for employees and customers. And that's why I signed into law the bipartisan supplemental budget that directed $100 million of Federal CARES Act dollars to the Michigan Strategic Fund to implement the Michigan Small Business Restart Program. Now, these grants, up to $20,000 each, will support Michigan's small businesses and nonprofits that are reopening but have experienced a loss of income as a result of this crisis. As of this morning, small businesses and nonprofits can submit their application for restart grants through a single statewide application at michiganbusiness.org/restart. There will be a 3-week application window, and then all applications will be provided to the 15 local economic development partners that will administer the grants for a particular region. As we work to continue to ensure COVID-19 relief resources are benefiting all small businesses in the state equitably, 30% of grants awarded under this will be going to minority-owned and women-owned or veteran-owned businesses. We know helping these businesses thrive is critical to bringing more economic prosperity overall to populations that often remain underserved. The Michigan Agricultural Safety Grant Program application also went live this morning at michiganbusiness.org/agsafety. This $15 million grant program will help our farmers and food processors in the state access PPE, testing equipment, training for workers, and housing solutions to ensure social distancing to protect our workers in the food supply here in Michigan. Together, these two programs put federal funding to work for small businesses in Michigan, the businesses that have been hardest hit by COVID-19, helping ensure that they can keep their doors open and put critical protections in place for their workers and their customers. Families across the state depend on Small Business Restart Program, particularly by building on families across the state depend on small businesses for their livelihoods. The Michigan Small Business Restart Program particularly will build on additional COVID-19 business relief efforts through the MEDC to create a strong foundation for Michigan's long-term economic recovery. So I appreciate the speed with which the MEDC was able to execute these programs to ensure that dollars could start getting into the hands of small businesses as soon as possible. In just 2 weeks, both the Restart grants and the Ag Safety grants went from words on a page to 2 fully operational programs accepting applications now. This is the urgency and know-how that we are approaching all economic recovery efforts with in this state, through the leadership of the MEDC in coordination with other key state agencies. So I know that people are anxious to return to normal, especially where our economy is concerned. The reality is that true, lasting economic recovery is only possible through public health recovery. That means we need everyone to do their part, to continue following guidelines driven by science and mask up. This is going to be a team effort, but Michiganders know how to get things done. We have pushed a curve down before. We have led the nation. We are capable of this. If everyone does their part, we will be successful. I know we can continue to lead this nation, but we got to mask up to do it. And with that, I'll introduce the Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist.
Thank you, Governor. And I also want to acknowledge Dr. Jonay Caldoun and Mark Burton, who are here joining us for remarks here in a few moments. You know, when we see the daily cases of coronavirus and the deaths that we're seeing compared to other states like Texas and Florida, it's easy to think that even while Michigan is experiencing an uptick, that, you know, we're doing okay, that we're out of the woods. But we're not. I talked about earlier, I've lost 23 people to COVID-19. These are real people. These are people who have stories, they have families, they have legacies that they were building that were cut short. It is long overdue that we do something about it. And these are people like, you know, an assistant pastor at the church that I grew up in, you know, a cousin down south who was the oldest living member of my family on my father's side, a Michigan legislator, talking about Representative Isaac Robinson, and others. I think the governor said it really well last week when she said, like, I don't care what's on your mask. You can wear a mask that says, I hate wearing masks. I just care that it's on your face. We need everybody to step up. Wear a mask. Wear a homemade mask. Wear a mask with a pattern. Wear a mask that reminds people of the greatest university in the history of the world.
I am.
Wear a mask for the other school. You know, everyone needs to step up. I mean, to use an analogy, we strap a piece of cloth across our chest when we get in a car to prevent loss of life. Now, all we're saying is that if you strap a piece of cloth across your face, you can prevent people getting sick and people losing their lives. You know, most of the times when I speak, you hear me using a phrase stand tall. Stand tall for Michigan. Stand tall for whatever I'm talking about. I don't say that just because I'm 6'8", even though Coach Izzo told me I was 7 feet, which I'm going to feel great about for a really long time. It is a reminder. Stand tall means to be proud of doing the right thing. We can all stand tall and do the right thing for our friends, our family members, our neighbors, our co-workers, and our communities when we mask up for the state of Michigan. So let's all stand tall and do that together. With that, I'd like to welcome here to the podium Dr. Joneigh Calhoun.
All right, so go blue. Thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor. So today we announced 71,197 cases of COVID-19 and a total of 6,085 deaths here in the state of Michigan. We had 891 additional cases that were reported today. So that's very concerning. Overall, over the past few weeks, we've seen increases in cases across the entire state, which again is very concerning. But each region looks a little bit different. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The Grand Rapids region has our highest rate of cases at 53 new cases per million people per day. The Kalamazoo and Detroit regions both have over 30 cases per million people per day. Saginaw, Jackson, Lansing, and the Upper Peninsula have over 20 cases per million people per day. And for the Upper Peninsula, cases have been rising for 6 weeks, and this is the highest rate that they've had during the entire outbreak. Traverse City also has over 15 cases per million people per day, with cases steadily rising over the past 3 weeks. Overall, and this is good news, we have significantly increased our testing numbers to over 21,000 tests per day over the past week, and this continues to steadily increase. What's concerning, however, is that as we are increasing our testing, the percent of those tests that are coming back positive is also increasing, and that number is now up to 3.4%. That is up from 2.8% the previous week. 3% is the cutoff that a lot of national experts say is where you really want to be under. So this is an indicator that there is ongoing spread of the disease and that we are not simply seeing more cases just because we are doing increased testing. So we're seeing outbreaks in multiple settings, including bars, churches, offices, gyms, long-term care facilities, weddings, family dinners, parties. People are gathering. What we also know is that there are many cases where we do not know the source of the spread. And this is really important. This means that it is spreading in the community, and that's even more importantly why we should all be wearing our masks. The age distribution for cases has also changed. So now the group with the highest rate of new cases is the 20 to 29 age group, and that is followed by the 30 to 39-year-old age group. So this is a really important point. Young people have to understand that they are not immune to this disease. Young people can get very sick from this disease, they can be hospitalized, and they can even die. Even if someone no longer needs to be in the hospital, there are possible long-term health impacts from COVID-19, many of which are still unknown. People can have persistent lung damage. We're seeing studies and reports of possible long-term brain damage and psychiatric challenges as a result of COVID-19 infection. And even if you don't get very ill from the disease, think about the people that you can spread it to. People with underlying medical conditions, those who are older, people who could easily lose their lives. We know of families that have lost multiple people across generations because of COVID-19. So regardless of how old you are, do the right thing, not just for yourself, but for the people in your household, your family, and your community. No one knows how this disease could impact them. So just do everything you can to not get it. Wear your mask, wash your hands, and do not participate in large gatherings. It's very simple. So the increasing numbers we're seeing across the state also shows the critical need for testing and contact tracing, which we've talked a lot about, and which we continue to ramp up here in Michigan. We've continued to see a steady increase in testing over the last week, and we're moving closer to our goal of 30,000 tests per day. So testing is central to our ability to be able to contain COVID-19. So I urge everyone, again, please get tested. If you're working outside the home, If you feel sick or if you've been close to someone who's been diagnosed with COVID-19 or they're having symptoms, you should get tested. The state has over 300 testing sites that are available. Many of them are also no cost. You can find a test site at michigan.gov/coronavirus test. We've also partnered with 211, so you can call them to get assistance in locating a testing site. We're also continuing to make good progress with our contact tracing. Our goal is to reach at least 90% of people within 48 hours of a positive test. However, unfortunately, we are completing over 70% of those interviews within that time frame. And so we are continuing to have challenges with people not answering their phones when public health staff call. Please pick up the phone if you see a call from your local health department. We're also seeing that in about a third of cases, people who test positive for the disease are not giving public health staff the information about their close contacts, even if they do pick up the phone. So we understand that individuals may feel uncomfortable about giving out names and contact information of their friends and family. We understand that. But please know that we do not share this information with anyone. But we will try to contact these individuals to make sure they know that they should quarantine and potentially get tested themselves. So this case investigation and contact tracing work is so important if we're going to be able to successfully slow the spread of the disease in our state. The state's also pushed millions of dollars out in funding to our local health departments so that we can hire additional case investigators and contact tracers for the fall. This will be incredibly important as we prepare for potential second surge. We don't expect there to be a widely available vaccine for COVID-19 for several months. We all know there is no antiviral treatment. So the most important thing, and really the only thing we can do to prevent spread of the disease, is to not come in contact with the virus in the first place. This means basic public health practices like washing hands, maintaining 6 feet of distance between you and other people, and wearing masks. And let me talk a little bit more about masks and why they're so important. So COVID-19 is spread, it's a virus. It's spread through droplets through the air, and they spread when people are doing simple things like coughing, sneezing, yelling, talking, or just simply breathing. Those droplets travel through the air. They can land on your face or in your mouth, your nose, your eyes. And once that happens, that's how people get infected. This is not a new concept. Okay, healthcare workers have been using masks to prevent all kinds of respiratory diseases for quite a long time. Masks work. A simple cloth face covering can reduce the chance of spreading the virus by about 70%. We've heard that talked about today. So I just want everyone to know this is not a joke. It is not a hoax. This is not about politics. Just wear your mask because you want to live and you want to protect those around you. It's one easy action that makes us all safer. I know it's been hard. For more than 4 months, everyone's lives have been completely changed. We can't do some of the things that we were doing before. But we can get through this together, and we will. And it will be so much easier, and fewer people will lose their lives if we are all patient and band together to fight this disease. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Mark Burton.
Thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Jay. Good afternoon, everybody. Following the outbreak of COVID-19, small businesses have faced significant economic impacts, including challenges with cash flow and resources needed to support their employees. At the same time, communities around the state have realized once again just how vital small businesses are to their economic health and livelihoods. Michigan's food and agricultural industry has also been hard hit by the outbreak and finds itself in need of additional support as Michigan farms and agricultural processors work to keep their employees and the state's food supply safe from the virus. It could not be more clear that the Michigan Small Business Restart Grant Program and the Michigan Agricultural Safety Grant Program, which as of 9 a.m. this morning are now both accepting applications at michiganbusiness.org, are more important than ever for Michigan to address the impacts of the ongoing pandemic here in our state. MEDC is in a position to start getting $115 million in federal funds into the hands of businesses, nonprofits, and farms across the state just 2 weeks after being signed into law by the governor, providing a crucial infusion of capital to support the path to economic recovery in our state. The $100 million for Restart grants are up to $20,000 each and will provide small businesses and nonprofits working capital to support payroll expenses, rent, mortgage payments, and similar expenses. To make it as simple as possible, there is a single statewide application at michiganbusiness.org. All application reviews and grant disbursements will be administered by 15 local economic development organization partners covering all 83 counties to ensure local priorities and needs are taken into account. Decisions on Restart grant awards will be made after the application period closes on August 5th, and it is important to note that this program is not a first-come, first-served situation. MEDC is also proud to be working with our partners at the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development and at Greenstone Farm Credit Services to get $15 million in federal CARES Act funds into the hands of farms and food processors to support critical costs around COVID testing, PPE, employee training, improved sanitation, and temporary housing issues. With these 2 additional grant programs authorized just last week, the MEDC team has now deployed 17 different COVID response programs in just 4 months. These programs have directly supported more than 3,400 Michigan companies across all 83 counties, helped retain nearly 15,000 jobs for Michigan workers, and facilitated the production of more than 5.5 million units of PPE and other critical supplies right here in Michigan. We have also made it a focus to ensure recovery efforts focus on economic opportunities for all businesses throughout Michigan. To date, 42% of relief efforts deployed by the MEDC have gone to disadvantaged areas across the state. And we will also be working closely with partners to meet statutory requirements that 30% of the Restart grant funds be allocated to women, minority, and/or veteran-owned businesses. Targeted relief programs like these provide a crucial lifeline to help our small businesses, communities, entrepreneurs, and workers weather the immediate crisis. In the meantime, our team at the MEDC, who have worked so hard, so quickly to bring these programs to life, continue to focus on creating a long-term runway for economic recovery by growing businesses and resilient, diverse, and vibrant communities long after this crisis concludes. Once again, detailed information and applications for both programs are available at michiganbusiness.org, and we encourage business owners, farmers, entrepreneurs, and others who may qualify for these resources to visit the site to learn more today. And finally, the best way to help with economic recovery across the state is to mask up, practice social distancing, and follow directives. The only way we can ensure full economic recovery is to mitigate this threat to public health. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Dr. J, Lieutenant Governor. With that, I am happy to open it up for a few questions.
Governor, can you talk about so many parents at home wondering about school in the fall, the metrics you're going to use, and what a deadline would be for them to expect a decision as to whether schools can actually open?
So, as you'll recall, with the council's recommendation and the executive order that reflected the work that they did, we have articulated a number of things for different phases of the My Safe Start re-engagement. School boards are to have plans for phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5, depending on what phase a particular region is in. For instance, currently right now, if you're a school board in the UP. There are a number of recommendations, there are some requirements, but largely there's quite a bit of discretion that the school boards have to determine what school is going to look like. If you're in phase 4, which is 6 out of 8 regions in the state, there are a lot more things that are required to be in that plan, but still it is incumbent on the school board to come up with a phase 3 plan, phase 4 plan, phase 5 plan. The troubling thing about the numbers of where we are now, how many cases a day, Dr. J? About 900? Almost 900 cases today. It's the largest number we've had since May 14th, all right? So that's the trajectory that we're currently on. That's why masking up is so important right now. We are trying to hold on to staying in phase 4. But if that trajectory continues, and we have to move some regions back to phase 3, that means there will not be in-person instruction, and the school board plans about how they're going to deliver remote education are going to be utilized. And so what I can tell you is that if the numbers keep going where they're going, it's going to be very problematic, and we may very likely have to take some steps backwards. What I can't tell you is what are people going to do between now and that 55 days. If the majority of us mask up, if all of us mask up, every kid will be in school this fall. If everyone masks up, we're going to see our numbers plummet and our economy is going to get stronger. If everyone masks up, we'll move the whole state into phase 5 and re-engage in a way that will be the envy of every other state in the nation. Now, if some of us mask up, well, we're going to watch the numbers and see where our caseloads go. But as we know, that the critical numbers we've been watching are the fact that we've increased our testing, which is something that is a great tribute to Dr. J and our health department doing incredible work. Our percent of positive cases in those tests that are being done, the number of hospitalizations. We know that's a lagging indicator, but still it is something that we watch closely. So these are all factors. When will we have to make a decision so schools know which way it's going? It's going to be a lot closer to that start date, because I'm hopeful that in the coming weeks we're going to see these numbers go down, and perhaps we can solidify at least phase 4, maybe even re-engage more things in our economy. But it all depends on mask wearing, Rod, and that's why it's so difficult to give you a hard and fast date and a hard and fast number. We're watching the trends. I'm listening to our public health expertise, and we're hopeful, but we're going to do everything we can to tighten up now so we don't have to take steps backward. Did you want to add anything, Dr. J? You're good? Okay. All right.
Yes. Governor Whitmer, a day into this mask mandate led to a tragedy and then another incident of a stabbing up north. Does that alarm you, and what can be done to protect employees who try to enforce this mask wearing when it's being seen as so contentious?
So let me start with this. We're asking people to do a simple act of wearing a piece of cloth on their face, all right? It shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be about rivalries. It shouldn't be about anything other than doing what we need to do to keep ourselves safe, our families safe, and our communities safe, all right? I've given the economic reasons for masking up. I've given the health reasons for masking up. It's the simple act of wearing a piece of cloth on your face when you're in a public space or when you're outside but in a crowded space. That's it. This should not be this flashpoint that it seems to be. I'm incredibly sad about the tragedy that happened in Eaton County. I'm incredibly sad about the reaction that some have had. The majority of people are doing the right thing, and I'm proud and grateful for that. I am grateful that this 70-something-year-old man stepped in to support a clerk who was asking a patron to just mask up. I cannot ever pretend that I understand someone that would become murderous over wearing a piece of cloth on your face. But what I can say is that violence is never the solution. We can disagree on a lot of things, but we all have to recognize that this is one simple act for the greater good, for our individual good, that will make a huge difference. I can tell you right now that the people of Florida are in the midst of what is the worst experience with COVID-19, and that could be us in a matter of weeks if we don't take this seriously right now. So I ask people to show some kindness, some understanding, extend a little grace to one another, and just wear that mask when you're out and about. That's it.
Governor, your executive order on Friday did have the $500 fine penalty associated with that. When you were considering that, contemplating that, did you talk with local police departments, local sheriffs? What were your expectations for their enforcement? And since several of them have said we're not going to enforce it on various levels, what's your plan B?
Listen, plan B is people don't wear masks and we end up having to take steps back in the economy. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Listen, we've never anticipated that a lot of people are going to get arrested and pay fines, and this is not about being punitive. This is about recognizing this is a duty that each of us should undertake. We have laws, we have rules, no shoes, no shirt, no service. Now it's just no shoes, no shirt, no mask, no service. It's just one more thing that we can do, that we must do to keep people safe. If the state of Alabama today is issuing an ordinance or issuing an executive order just like the one that I signed, this tells you it's not a partisan issue. This isn't about anything other than trying to get our arms around a virus that does not care who you are, that travels because you're traveling. So when you're out and about traveling, wear the mask. Now, as regard to the sheriffs and local law enforcement, we do have an ongoing dialogue. I know we've got some calls set up for this week, and I think that that's important. I'm hopeful that sheriffs will recognize that wearing a mask can save lives in their community. I know it's hard. I know that resources are limited, but this has never been about punishing anyone. It's about all of us stepping up and doing the right thing to do to protect ourselves and our families and our communities and our economy and the frontline workers. So let's take the politics out of this. Let's recognize we're all on the same team. You know, there are some examples of sheriffs who are doing the right thing. You know, Sheriff in Kalamazoo County, Richard Fuller, has issued a statement saying that, you know, they're expecting businesses to step up and keep their patrons and workforce safe through mask enforcement. Benny Napoleon in Wayne County has given orders. I think, you know, sheriffs in Oakland, Bay, Marquette, Muskegon, Kent, Washington. We got a lot of leadership in this state who wants us to be successful on this, and that's why it's my hope that all law enforcement officers are going to wear their masks and ensure that everyone in the community is safe. They've sworn an oath to uphold the law, and right now the law is that everyone's got to mask up.
Governor, you mentioned several times there's 55 days until the scheduled post-Labor Day start of school, but of course, as you know, many districts start earlier, sometimes much earlier, some scheduled for mid to late August to start. Are you considering an order or rule that pushes everyone to after Labor Day to buy more time, or can districts expect to be able to start more or less when they want?
So I think that's a great question, Zach. Candidly, we've not had a conversation about whether or not to order a specific start date. In the school order, it was really giving school boards some discretion, permitting actually them to start earlier if they wanted to. You know, at this juncture with the way that our numbers are going, I do know that we are all having a lot of conversation about where we might want to land, and so I think you've asked a really good question, but at this point there's not a solid, you know, perfect answer for you. But we're looking very closely at what is going on across the country and around the world. There are countries that have resumed school. Their kids are in masks and face shields. Little kids, they're doing it. They're re-engaged, but re-engagement is dependent on the numbers going down. That's where success has been had in the re-engagement of schools, where COVID numbers are going down. We're not in that position right now, and that's what's so concerning. That's why I'm not counting down to the first day of school because I want to get my kids out of the house, but every parent knows when that first day of school is because we know it's important that they get back in classroom. That's where the best, you know, kind of education can happen. So that's the goal here.
We'll take just a couple more.
Now, today we saw almost 900 cases. That number has gone up and down over the last few weeks, going up. But deaths have stayed pretty low. Is that because we're doing a better job of treating these cases, or are we finding more asymptomatic people? Why are they separated?
I appreciate that you pretended that was for me, but you know it's for Dr. Caldoun. I'll ask her to come.
We just talked yesterday. You didn't ask me, but so no, that's a great question. So what's different now compared to March and April is we have a lot more testing availability. So in the very beginning, we were testing people who were really only in the hospital, which is unfortunate, but that's the number of tests that we had. So now what we're seeing is there's more and more tests, and as I said, we're also seeing people who are younger. So 20 to 29 is the age group that has the highest number of new cases. That age group tends to be a little bit healthier, and so right now we're not seeing the hospitalizations and the deaths go up, but again, that also tends to be a lagging indicator. So first, you get sick, you get your test, and then you fight the disease, and we see what happens then. So I wouldn't get too complacent about the deaths, and we're closely watching that as well as what's going on in other states.
I'm only you one over you mentioned the importance of testing as an overall part of the strategy. It's my understanding there are still things that must qualify someone for testing. Are we approaching the point where people can get tested for no reason? And how do you expect that to open up some of the data you're seeing?
So that's a great question. So we, over at least 6 weeks ago, really significantly expanded. Anyone who wants a test really right now can get a test. We're testing in some communities just because they haven't seen enough testing done. And so those local health departments have particularly increased their testing. So again, if you're working outside your home, if you've got symptoms, if you've been exposed to someone, certainly there's some individuals who work in higher risk settings who are recommending, even mandating for nursing homes that they get tested on a regular basis. But right now, no one should be sitting at home thinking that they can't get a test. You can go to our website or call 211 and we can make that happen.
Thank you, Dr. J. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
We had in this last legislative session a number of key priorities, but our number one priority was to make the 2020 session the year of the teacher. We had proposed taking Florida from the bottom half of states in terms of average minimum teacher compensation and to bring us into the top 5. And Commissioner Corcoran was instrumental in articulating that plan, and then I obviously supported it and campaigned on it. It was tough because it had never really been done at this level before, certainly in the last generation, and we knew that it was going to require a significant financial commitment, but we really believed that it was the right thing to do, not only to reward teachers who were doing a good job, but also to continue to bring good people into the profession and ultimately benefit our students' education. So we fought for it and were able to achieve a total of $500 million of increase for teacher compensation. Most of that will go to that average minimum. I think that brings us to number 5 in the nation for the average minimum salary. And then there was the balance of the money would go to teachers who were already making more than that so that they were able to share in the compensation. So that was a huge win in terms of getting that through the legislature. The problem is that the budget was done and everything was done and ready for my review the second week of March, and I think everybody knows that the fiscal situation at the March timeframe to now was just different. Heck, even the second week of March, people were talking about coronavirus, but basically do very kind of just basic things. No one was really talking about the economy stopping, even at that point. So I knew that we'd have to deal with it, so we kept the budget. The legislature kept it. I said, it's not due till July 1st. I need to wait to make sure we have as much information as possible to be able to make the good decisions. And it was clear to me that we were going to need to save a lot of money out of that budget through gubernatorial vetoes of individual projects and line items. We had lost revenue in April, in May and June, not quite as much as was forecast, but it was still significant reductions. And so we had to plan for, even though we're working to get back on our feet, we had to plan for reductions in the expected revenue. So I was in a situation where I had to realize historic savings in terms of vetoes, but I also wanted to preserve some of the historic achievements that we made during the legislative session, chief among them the teacher compensation, but also things we did with environment and some of the other key areas that I know a lot of Floridians care about. So we were able to do a record-breaking $1 billion in vetoes, I vetoed some of my own stuff because you just had to make tough decisions, but we did that while preserving the increase for teacher compensation. And so that was something that I think is good. It was tough to get there, but we did, and I think we'll be better for it over the long haul. We also were able to continue to increase choices for parents and students, whether it's fortifying the Gardner Scholarship for our kids with unique abilities, whether it's expanding the Family Empowerment Scholarship. That has a real impact on a lot of lives, particularly folks who are low income. And then in the case of the Gardner Scholarship, in terms of students, that do need that special attention and that special type of education. So I think it was a really good year for parents in terms of their educational options. Commissioner Corcoran, I'm sure they're going to talk about what's going to happen in terms of the next school year. I know a lot of parents are trying to figure out, what exactly is going to happen. We're in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic, but we're also in a situation where we need to provide as many options to parents as possible in terms of the education of their kids. And I've said from the very beginning, how this thing evolves and how we move towards having school back in session. Any parent, has the option to opt for whatever they think is best for their kids in terms of academic, safety, what have you. So that means you want to continue with virtual learning, even though your school district may have kids back in school. As a parent, we need to empower them to make those decisions. Now, having done this, looked at this data since February in terms of the coronavirus, I can tell you I have 3 kids, all young. I am really amazed at the extent to which people under 18 are low risk for this. And that is something that has been, I think, borne out in the data in different countries, different states. And so we do have data to go on. We can say that, fortunately, our school children are at less risk. And, in Florida, we never closed, even though we went to distance learning with the K through 12, we never closed daycares. Now, some of them had to because of financial pressure, but there was never a government mandate at the state level, and even places like Miami-Dade maintain them. And, you didn't have major issues resulting from that, and I think it's because you have the kids who are not likely to get seriously ill compared to other demographics, but then also, and I think this is borne out in research that we're seeing all across Europe and the experience in Europe, is particularly primary school age kids are not significant transmitters to adults. For whatever reason, with influenza, you typically view the kids as the main driver of the epidemic, and particularly in a school situation. That has not been the case in any of these studies that have looked at it. And so I think that's important too, because obviously the health of the individual student is paramount. But then even if they are not significantly at risk, which I think is the case, if they're going to contribute to the epidemic spreading just because they're in school and potentially exposing the adults who are there, that's something that obviously needs serious consideration. That was probably the main reason why most places went to distance learning in March, because by mid-March, we did have a pretty good sense of kind of the age stratification for risk on this thing, really skewed older, and then once you got into the middle ages, it was more linked to comorbidities, and then fortunately, under 18 really was almost entirely linked to significant underlying health issue. So I think we understood that, but I think it was, okay, we don't want this to contribute to expanding the epidemic, and so I think that's why places around the country made that decision. But I think like the experience with daycare, not only in Florida but around the country, actually they've looked at New York, who in the height of theirs, having the daycares open and not seeing the child to adult transmission. So I think that's something that's important because the best interest of the child is obviously paramount, But we also understand that there are a lot of adults who are working in our school system as administrators, as teachers, and then a whole host of other things that go a part of it. And I think it's paramount that there's a safe environment for everybody, and not merely just the kids. And I think with Richard working with the school districts, I know they're working really hard to develop ways to have a safe environment. I'm confident it can be done, because I've seen it done in other areas of life over the past several months, not just here in Florida, but around the country. It does take effort. It takes attention to some of the risks that are involved. And whether it's a school situation, whether it's anything with state government, I think the private sector has embraced the notion that if you have an employee who is particularly at risk for this, then by all means, you have to have special accommodations that are provided. That would be true for a student too, and it would also be true for an employee, an adult employee. That I think that is without question, regardless of what you're talking about. And so we have a good sense of kind of who the more at-risk individuals are and who may be lower risk even amongst the adult population. But I think it's important that parents have the ability to make a choice. If they're not comfortable, the last thing you want to do is shove people in if they're just not comfortable. Look, we have some parents that really want the kids back in school. They think it's important. We have some others who, look, it's a time. There's a lot of fear out there, a lot of anxiety. Me at this moment wouldn't be as comfortable. And I think I told Commissioner Corcoran, as you do this, you have to give the parent that option to opt for virtual if you want to. So I think it's important as you're looking at the reopening, focusing, of course, on health risks, viral transmission, all that, very important, but also looking at the risks on the other side of not giving an option for parents to have in-person instruction. As much as Florida has done, I think, really been a leader in the virtual education, bottom line is our kids fell behind just like everybody else. There's just no way around that. Heck, if you didn't fall behind, we wouldn't have worked so hard to get the teacher salary increases. We believe that teacher there is really significant to a child's well-being, and that's, I think, something that we really have to consider. What are the risks of not providing that type of option for a parent? And yes, parents, some of it's linked to the economy, particularly lower income families. They may not have child care options. They want to go back to work and all that. And that's part of it. But quite frankly, for me, it's more about the risk to the development of our school children that's paramount and really should be what the decision rests on. And I think that having gone through what we went through, the academic achievement suffers, just the socialization, being able to be with other kids, activities, all these different things are very, very important. And I am concerned if that's not available for anybody. So it's important. But I think having a lot of input from the public. And I was in Miami-Dade yesterday. Miami-Dade County, in terms of the coronavirus, is more challenges than other parts of the state, even as other parts of the state have seen more outbreak than we had been seeing in April, May, and early June. Miami-Dade has had to deal with it, I think, in a much higher level. Part of that is because of the population density. Some of it is about because they have extended families who tend to get. There's a lot of reasons, and so you look at that situation. And they're going to have to make certain decisions there. Then you look at other school districts that would probably be in a different part. So I'm very sensitive to local conditions, not just in terms of what the virus is doing, but also in terms of what the parents would like to see. And most of the people I've talked to, I think, like, if you go back, if we were doing this at the beginning of June, probably a strong majority would have said, let's get back. As we've started to see more outbreak at the end of June and into July, that has now become more split. And I think, you'd be foolish not to listen to the parents and make sure they have all the options that they need. So I know folks are antsy about, what exactly is going to happen. Are we going to be in or not? And, what I would just say is I think it's probably, as much as we'd like to have every decision made as far out in advance as possible, because that is good. It lets people plan. I think making the right decision and providing the right array of options, getting it right is probably the most important thing. And I know a lot of these school districts are really working hard to try to get it right, balancing a lot of different priorities and a lot of different issues. And so my hat's off to those who are working for this. Final thing I'll say is just we've been very active in distributing funds that we received from the Federal CARES Act. We announced this distribution last month. You're looking at a pretty significant amount of money, $173 million Governor's Fund, $223 million Child Care Fund, and then 10% of the $770 million that was sent to school districts. So a large focus for us in terms of where we're putting the money is on reading proficiency. We want to have 90% of students proficient in reading by 2024. $64 million will be used to close achievement gaps. This will support 4 to 6 week programs on school campuses to students from kindergarten to grade 5 who are identified as having substantial deficiency in reading based on the most recent available screening and progress monitoring assessment and with teacher recommendations considered. We're going to do $20 million to engage school districts and schools in identifying and adopting the best reading curriculum and supplemental instructional materials to drive teaching and learning, particularly in those early grades, K through 3. $15 million will be used to train and develop 2,000 highly effective reading coaches, develop and deploy strategy for in-classroom support with reading coaches, and develop regional support teams to identify and assist students with reading improvements. $45 million is set aside as safety net funds for various scholarship programs. $8 million will be used to allow every public school student in 2021 academic year to take the ACT or the SAT free of charge. $5 million will be used to expand civic literacy in our schools. We also have a lot of money for workforce and job training programs, $35 million to increase capacity around short-term, in-demand technical certificate programs, market-driven and in-demand clock-hour career certificate programs, and in-demand industry certification preparation courses at our state and technical colleges. And one of the things I think that's going to come out of this period is when a lot of companies went to remote work from home, a lot of them in the white-collar world found they didn't really miss much of a beat. And they don't necessarily need to have the big buildings and office buildings and everything anymore. You can't, though, and I think that's probably going to mean they'll probably have fewer people employed over the long term. So that's going to be a concern. But then I also think that there's really going to be no substitute for some of this vocational hands-on skills that people need to be able to make the economy function in a wide variety of areas. And so we've put a lot of emphasis on that, and we think it's going to continue to be important. We dedicated $2 million for increased telehealth services for students who are experiencing difficulties, particularly with mental health during this period. Our Division of Emergency Management is going to coordinate with school districts across the state to survey school district needs for personal protective equipment and other sanitation supplies. And then finally, the $223 million Child Care Fund will be used for early learning programs.
because of the numbers backwards towards phase 3?
Well, I can tell you on Memorial Day, Michigan was one of 2 states in the nation that was on track to contain COVID-19. The aggressive actions that we took paid off. The people of the state took it seriously and did the right thing. And because of that, we were like one of only 2 states that was colored in green on the national map. Now, if you look and see kind of the rolling averages, 7-day rolling averages, you know that we are in red, just like a lot of other states. We're not in the darkest red like Arizona and Texas, but it's concerning. And so if this trend continues, then it's likely we might have to roll back. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I don't want to go back. I don't think any of us does.
And Governor, talk about this new executive order when it comes to masking inside of public places. What does it mean?
It means think about the usual rules of no shirt, no shoes, no service. Now it's no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. It's really that simple. Simply by wearing a face covering, we can drop the likelihood of COVID spread into negligible numbers if everyone's wearing a mask. 2 people who are masked, if one is sick, it's very, very low likelihood that the other's going to get COVID-19. But if only one of them has a mask, even if it's the COVID patient, the other one can still inhale droplets from a cough that might seep out the side of a mask. But if they're both masked, they're a lot safer. And that's why every one of us has to act as though we are carrying COVID, that we're thinking of others, we're thinking about ourselves, and we're thinking about the people we live with, our loved ones.
And we saw President Trump wore a mask when he was visiting Walter Reed. Talk a little bit about that. Were you encouraged by seeing that?
I was very pleased to see it. I've been asking the White House, encouraging them to really maybe perhaps even adopt a federal mask order. I think that would be a really smart thing, but they haven't embraced that yet. But the fact that the president was donning a mask when he was at Walter Reed, I think was incredibly important. I went out of my way last week to acknowledge people like Dick Cheney and Mike Pence and Mitt Romney for wearing a mask, because we got to take the politics. Cheney and Mike Pence and Mitt Romney for wearing a mask, because we got to take the politics out of this. This is about our health. It's about our safety. It's about getting our kids back in school, and it's about limiting the economic pain that we've already suffered.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer, thanks for your time today.
Saline, Michigan is a quiet town in Washtenaw County, and that's the way the people who live here like it. But now Saline is in the news. A number of cases of COVID-19, all connected to a house party over the 4th of July weekend.
The Washtenaw County Health Department has identified 43 new cases, the majority of them connected to a large house party in early July in the Saline area. Young people between the ages of 15 to 25 have tested positive for the virus.
I would expect that to happen if somebody got together like that. They're just not being careful, and they really ought to be.
Fear is a powerful thing, so, it scares everyone.
As every region in the state is seeing an uptick in COVID-19 cases and a statewide mask mandate now in effect, Governor Gretchen Whitmer weighing in on the dozens of cases connected to the house party in Washtenaw County.
There are so many potential interactions that could have happened with each of those people in the days from the party to when they got tested and got their positive result. That's how COVID-19 spreads.
Large groups of people in enclosed indoor settings is considered much higher risk compared to being outside and being able to practice social distancing.
And that's why we stay away from everybody.
In the early days of the global pandemic,
both my wife and daughter had it. My wife, she ended up, she was sick. My daughter, she showed no signs. So there's 2 people in my house that had it. I never got it.
Despite having 2 immediate family members who contracted the virus.
Would you feel comfortable going to a party of 100 people?
Yeah, I would. Would I wear a mask? Probably not.
In Saline, Camila Mary, Fox 2 News.
We are in Macomb County today talking to Sheriff Anthony Wickersham about the new rule that went into effect here in the state of Michigan regarding wearing a face mask. As we all know, the governor signed an executive order last week making it a mandate for all Michiganders to wear a face mask inside all indoor public places. That includes restaurants, malls, barbershops, boutiques, hair salons, all of the above, you are now required to wear a face mask when you walk inside those indoor public places. We spoke to Anthony Wickersham, who has made a statement, but he's also providing more clarification. He is not necessarily saying he will ignore this new rule. What he is saying is he cannot respond to every single phone call his department may get going forward of someone not wearing a face mask at an indoor public place. What he is saying is if a situation gets out of hand, that's when he steps in. Here's more from the sheriff.
If the business tells an individual that they can't come in or, they have to wear the mask, and they refuse either to wear a mask or refuse to leave the store, instead of getting into a confrontation, that's where we said we would respond, and then we would take enforcement action or help up the local business to make sure there isn't any problems in those stores.
With that being said, there is something you can do if you're at a restaurant, at a barber shop, any kind of business, and you spot someone inside that establishment not wearing a face mask and is being allowed. You can call this number, 888-535-6316. That will get you to the governor's office and Michigan State Police. Therefore, you can make an official complaint in a very safe way without having to approach anyone about not wearing a face mask. In Macomb County, Josh Landon, Fox 2 News.
Detroit is a national model for having dealt with COVID-19.
Mayor Mike Duggan says the proof is in the numbers.
We're losing upwards of 250 people a week. This last 7 days, the first 7 days of July, we had one death in this city.
But after moving forward in this fight against a deadly virus, Mayor Duggan does not want Detroit to take steps backwards.
We're starting to see some early signs of trends that are concerning. You go back a few weeks, we were basically seeing about 10 new cases a day. The last week or so, it's been 20 or 30.
Mayor Duggan says the number of COVID cases are higher in the suburbs and other parts of the state. And that's why he wants Detroiters to understand the solution to getting back on track is simple.
80% of this is wear a mask.
It was wearing a mask and proper social distancing that let Detroit take the lead in the fight against COVID-19. And the mayor wants to keep this position so Detroit can get back to business.
I have been arguing for a while to the governor that I believe that the city of Detroit is acting responsibly, and we need to keep reopening the economy.
And to help small businesses in the city get back on their feet, economic relief is available.
Next week, Detroit small businesses are going to have another $7.25 million available in grants from the state of Michigan, thanks to the governor and the state legislature.
To learn how to apply, go to fox2detroit.com. In Southfield, Ingrid Kelly, Fox 2 News.
I think it's going a little too far.
Whitmer announced the news on Friday. Effective today, everyone in Michigan is required to wear a mask in every enclosed space. You must also wear them in any outdoor setting where social distancing is not feasible, all because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
It actually doesn't bother me. I'm a nurse, so I wear them 12 to 16 hours a day, so it's kind of second nature to me at this point.
For me, it's a pain in the butt because I do wear hearing aids and they tangle up in my hearing aids. So it's a pain for me.
Rich says it's also hard for him to understand what people are saying when they're talking because he can't see their mouths.
I think it's ridiculous. I think it's unconstitutional. I don't think she has the authority to do it, and I'm not in favor of it.
But the governor says her executive order is based on science, a preventative measure to slow the spread of COVID-19. Every region in the state has been seeing an uptick in cases, and after months of strongly recommending people mask up, Whitmer now leaving nothing up to question about where the state stands on face masks. Those who violate the order are subject to a $500 fine, and businesses can now refuse entry or service to people who refuse to put on a mask.
I've seen way too many people in stores without a mask that aren't social distancing, and I'm 65, and I've got 10 grandchildren, and I don't want to leave them without a grandma. But today, I have not seen one person without a mask inside.
Margot and Jim have been wearing homemade masks for months, and they're having fun with it.
That's one of his old shirts that he loved, so he said, I want one out of this shirt.
In Saline, Camille and Mary, Fox 2 News.
We are near the corner of 9 Mile and Woodward in the city of Ferndale, a very popular location where you have businesses side by side. And here in the city of Ferndale and elsewhere in the state of Michigan, starting today, you will be required to wear a face mask whenever you walk inside any establishment. That is a mandate that went into effect at midnight. This is based on the executive order Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed last week, making it a mandate for people to wear a mask inside every establishment to stop the spread of coronavirus. Also, for outdoor situations, if you are not able to maintain 6 feet of social distancing, you will also be required to wear a face mask. Violators who do not comply can face up to $500 in fines. Business owners, managers, they have the right to deny entry and or service people who do not comply with this new mandate. We spoke to a local business owner here in the city of Ferndale about the new rules.
I think it's a great thing. It should have been done a long time ago. We have been doing it for quite a while now, and if they don't have a mask, they're not coming in. And we have very little resistance. People are complying with the new mandate, and I think it's great. And I like Governor Whitmer, and she's doing a great job as far as I'm concerned. And we're doing the best we can, like everybody else.
You just heard from a longtime business owner here in the city of Ferndale, Joel Fisher, who owns this neighborhood discount store, and he is being very true to his word. We were standing over here across the street a short time ago, and we caught 2 people walking to the front door looking to get in to pick up their items, and they were not wearing a face mask. The employee at that discount store politely said, "No, you have to go get your face mask." They walked right back to their car a few steps away, got their face mask, and then were able to go inside. It's just a common sense reminder, if you will. Starting today, if you're going to be out and about, just have that face covering, have that mask with you, because it's a mandate going forward. Also, the governor touched on stopping the spread, or at least slowing down the spread of coronavirus. Here in the state of Michigan, we're a lot better compared to other states, but the governor's also focused on school this fall. That's a very hot topic going forward into the fall season, and she wants to be able to reopen school more so on a full scale as much as she possibly can. Therefore, she is hoping this mandate, and that people will follow the mandate, could help get her closer to that goal for all of us. Again, if you're going to be out and about, wear your face mask, wear your face covering. When you go inside an establishment, that's really what it comes down to. In Ferndale, Josh Landon, Fox 2 News.
To mask or not to mask, that is the question that so many people are asking, and it is a controversy across the country. Certain groups doing it more, other groups not so much. Let's get right to Caben Clausen. He's a data analyst with TruePublic.com. And Caben, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about young people, because I know that this has a lot to do with them. What are you finding?
What we're seeing across America is mask adoption is booming. And what's happening is social pressure has really taken over. Whereas before, a lot of young people were wondering if their friends were going to wear masks. And now as they see more and more of the majority of young people starting to wear masks, it's creating a social pressure where we've seen the numbers change dramatically. Just 6 weeks ago, only 17% of young Americans were wearing a mask, almost always. Today, that's up to 56%, and the trend line has been exploding all across America.
Wow, 56%, that's a pretty big number. Let's talk about the region and the states. Break it down for us in terms of what we're seeing demographically.
So in places like Michigan, Illinois, New York, California, we're seeing higher mass adoption than places in the South, like Mississippi, like Florida, Alabama. And once again, like much else in life, there's a political divide that's affecting mask adoption. But the main story here is masks are finally catching on with young Americans, where it's becoming a peer pressure situation almost, where it's like, if 9 out of 10 of your friends are wearing that, are you going to be the one person not wearing a mask? That's what's happening.
And then, Caben, there's quarantine fatigue, something that we obviously have heard before. One group in particular, again, being affected by this more than others.
Yeah, quarantine fatigue is the right word. We've seen a dramatic shift. So for most of COVID, we've been asking the question, how concerned are you about coronavirus? And the answer for people saying they're extremely concerned has been in the 40s to 50s. So 4 out of 10 Americans have been saying, I'm extremely concerned about coronavirus. That completely deteriorated over the month of June. Now just 1 in 10 young Americans are saying they're extremely concerned about coronavirus. What's happened here? On True Public, we're getting a lot of interesting comments, and one of the main ones has been they're just fatigued. They've been so cooped up for so long. Once they got the taste of freedom, once a young person in this country went to a restaurant or a bar or that first party, it's really hard for them to go back. And that's going to be the big question facing officials across this country, is trying to put people back into a situation they were already dying to get out of.
Caben Clausen with TruePublic.com. More data on your website. Interesting stuff. Thanks for joining us.
We are alerting consumers to please don't give in to this.
At first glance, it has a Department of Justice seal, a warning from the ADA, and the promise of a fine for denying access to the non-mask wearer. The problem is, it's fake.
Don't buy them online. You're exposing yourself to be a victim of identity theft.
With the Better Business Bureau, Elma Galvin says the cards have been advertised online for about $50. And by buying the laminated document, she says you may be losing much more than cash.
Keep in mind that when you're ordering this, what the scam artists are after is your personal information along with banking information.
If you take a closer look, the card has misspellings like an extra S in poses. It also uses the wrong names for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And even though some may think the Freedom to Breathe agency sounds like a legitimate organization, the DOJ says no way.
Department of Justice is not behind this.
And while there are people who have legitimate medical exemptions to not wear masks,
it's like if there is a newborn baby, babies which are less than 2 years of age should not be wearing masks.
Dr. Preeti Golecha says for the majority of us, face coverings are our first line of defense against COVID-19, coupled with social distancing and consistent hand washing.
Again, it doesn't block your oxygen supply, it doesn't block your carbon dioxide exchange, it just blocks those droplets coming out of your mouth.
The Better Business Bureau says if you encounter these posts, take a screenshot, then send it in to the Better Business Bureau, then send it in to the BBB as well as the Federal Trade Commission so they can investigate. Erica Erickson, Fox 2 News.
We're just trying to follow the rules.
It's really that simple for the owner of Genuine Toy Company in downtown Plymouth, Elle Dare, during this pandemic.
We don't want to spread the virus. We want to help stop it.
In business on Forest Street for nearly 11 years, Dare says, of course, the stay home, stay safe order hit them hard, like so many small businesses.
We were able to open for curbside, phone sales and curbside pickup.
Dare posting photos of items and pricing on the company's Facebook page while trying her best to abide by CDC guidelines and the governor's mandate. Dare deciding to require customers to wear masks at all times. And for those who can't or don't prefer to wear a mask,
we still offer phone sales and curbside pickup. We've even held up things to the window for people to look in. Say, do you want this one? Do you want this one?
But Dare says a couple of weeks ago, she started getting bombarded with negative comments after pages like this one popped up. And here in Michigan, even a list of businesses to boycott because they require face coverings.
We started getting messages on our Facebook page that just got really out of control. The messages were coming in, all night long, all day long, saying that we're going to sue you, all kinds of crazy stuff. It's a toy store. You don't want to go to a toy store Facebook page and see a bunch of ugly stuff.
Dare says the harassment online lasted about 4 or 5 days. She had to constantly delete posts and ban users from her page, but almost instantly.
It actually had the reverse effect than they were looking for.
Messages of support from across the country flooding the company's Facebook page. Regular customers stopping by to show their support, and even new customers popping in to buy a toy and to say they agree with Dare's decision.
People are saying, I'm going to use the list to support these businesses because I know I can shop safely.
So what does Elle Dare say to those internet trolls?
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
In downtown Plymouth, Erica Erickson, Fox 2 News.
There's a lot that we're dealing with related to the coronavirus, and rightfully so. But it was an opportunity to reflect on some achievements that we've achieved in Florida recently, particularly with our teacher pay increase, putting Florida in the top 5 for average minimum salary, and also expanding scholarships for low-income kids. So we're proud of the work that's been done, and obviously we want that to make a difference in the future. And I know a lot of parents have a lot of angst about just the situation generally. And then, of course, what's going to happen with the school year. And I know we have 67 different school boards, school districts, all looking at their particular circumstances. For me, I think one of the core principles is, parents need to have the ability to opt for the type of learning that they think is important. And so if they're more comfortable in a distance learning environment, then they obviously need to have that choice. I know there's a lot of different issues relating to how the schools will operate. And obviously we see the epidemic have a different shape in different counties, different regions of the state. But the parental choice, I think, is really the core component, because ultimately it's the parent that is in the best position to make decisions for their children. And so I reiterated that to the Board of Education and also instructed Commissioner Richard Corcoran on that accordingly. And I think it's very, very important. I was in Miami-Dade County yesterday meeting with a lot of the local officials, the county mayor, and then a lot of our municipal mayors. Miami-Dade's facing a tough challenge in terms of some of the rates at which people have been testing positive, some of the emergency department visits, the hospital admissions. But I think working together on a local level, collaborating with the state, and then also working with our federal partners, we'll be able to meet the challenge. And my view is we'll all work together. The state is going to continue to support the county as best we can. We have already sent additional healthcare personnel down to Miami-Dade County. A lot of those hospital systems, they have capacity to do a lot more if they need to in terms of having bed space. A lot of it is just personnel, and people need to have more personnel. So we've already done 150 to one of the systems, and we're having more go down there, and I think it's really, really important. We also at the state level over the last week or so have set up 4 new retail-based testing sites. So these are sites that are a little bit different than drive-through. One of them's at one of the malls. You go in, you can get swabbed really quickly and be able to get a test result. So we're going to continue to do that. I think Miami-Dade, we calculated it yesterday when I was down there with the county mayor, and I think 16 or 17% of the county population has taken a test during the course of the pandemic. So we want to continue to do that. We are, as a state, testing at an incredibly high clip. It's been roughly 90,000 tests a day for the past week. We had the one day where we did 143,000 test results. I think that was the results that came in over the weekend. And that's important. Obviously, when the epidemic started, particularly with a lot of the states that had the more severe outbreaks, they were doing a fraction of that. They were doing 10,000, 20,000 tests a day. We are capturing a lot more of the infections that are out there and providing folks the opportunity to get tested, including many of these people are not symptomatic. But one thing that I think is clear is we need to get these testing results back in a timely fashion. The state at the drive-through sites has set up relationships with some of these commercial labs, and when we went into the expansion of testing at the beginning of May, our request was a 48-hour turnaround from the time the swab was received until the test was run and then reported back to the person whether they were positive or negative. And we've had some labs who have done well, but many have not. And so the Department of Emergency Management is going to shift business away from labs who have failed to produce results in a timely fashion. If you have somebody go through one of the sites and then they get a result back 10 days later, that is not really going to be very helpful. So we think it's important. And so the state, when we're sending these tests away to the commercial labs, those who can produce are going to get more of the business, and I think that's the best way to go about it. We're also going to be debuting on Friday symptomatic lanes. So for people that have symptoms, there's going to be lanes at drive-through test sites at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami-Dade, at the War Memorial in Broward County, Orange County Convention Center, and the Regency Square Mall in Jacksonville. Those will be lanes where if you're symptomatic, you go through, you'll be able to do a self-swab, you'll be able to send it to a lab that will turn it around in a more timely fashion. And so this way you're getting the results back, we hope within 72 hours instead of 7 days. And I think that will help people with their peace of mind, but it's also just more effective in terms of if you have to isolate somebody, they need to know whether they're positive or not before it makes sense to isolate them. So we are very, I think, cognizant of some of the delays that we've seen at these labs, and we're doing our best to shift into those labs that are going to produce better results. We continue to make really good progress on testing, the routine testing of our staff that work at our long-term care facilities, which of course house our most vulnerable residents in terms of the coronavirus. We've now done, this is our first round after we had done the staff and the residents during April and May and the beginning of June. So we now have 122,000 test results back from staff, 2.79% positivity rate, which is actually much better than what we're doing in a lot of parts of the state. So we're actually happy with that. But we're doing this because you have so many people who get infected but don't develop symptoms. And so anytime someone goes to work at a long-term care facility, they are screened pursuant to state regulations. You know, have you been in contact with anyone who's been infected? Do you have a fever? They take the fever. They do all these different things, take the temperature. Well, if you're asymptomatic and you haven't had any obvious contacts, then you're going to be able to pass the screening and go in, but of course you could potentially spread that. So there was, we recently identified an outbreak at an LTC in North Central Florida. 50 staff members, I think all of them asymptomatic, tested positive. At that point, the Florida Department of Emergency Management dispatched 23 staff members. Florida Department of Health was on scene to be able to pick up the slack there. But this is kind of the exception where you have that type of spread amongst the staff, but we are finding examples of 1 or 2, sometimes 3 or 4. If you're testing every 2 weeks like we are, you're going to be able to identify more and more of those before it spreads widely inside the long-term care center, and that really is the name of the game, and that will absolutely, if you can prevent outbreaks there, will absolutely save lives. So we appreciate that arrangement that's allowing us to do that type of testing. We're also continuing with the antibody testing. We opened it up recently on our antibody sites, that some of our big drive-through sites. We had been doing first responders and healthcare workers, and they obviously can still do it. We're now saying anyone from the general public who wants to do it. And what we've seen is we've seen a pretty significant increase in the percentage of people testing positive for antibodies over the past week, pretty much hovering about 10%, which is more than what we had seen. And you figure these antibody results really are probably reflecting infections that have happened 4 to 6 weeks prior, typically. So that's actually a good sign to see more antibodies, because that creates resistance in terms of the ability for the disease to spread. We're also working really hard to support our healthcare workers, to support our hospitals who are caring for folks who are ill. The capacity in terms of beds, as I mentioned, is strong. It really is the personnel that is going to be the key. So I mentioned some of the people that we're deploying to Miami-Dade. We're going to be deploying over 1,000 people throughout the state very soon. We have the capacity to potentially up that to 3,000. I also had a discussion today with the VA secretary. They have resources, and we're offering different things. And I said, look, the personnel is really what we need. So we're going to be working with them to get some of their medical personnel to help supplement. It's been a long road for folks in the medical profession. This became something that was very earnest in March. We went through March and April. You know, it was a little quieter in May for the general public and the beginning of June. But during that time, I mean, you had transfers from long-term care facilities. You had a lot of stuff going on in these hospitals, and now obviously the pace is picking up even more. So it's really important that we do everything we can to support them. We also have a request that we think will be fulfilled in the near future from HHS for additional staffing, and we welcome that support. We are also up to 15 COVID-only nursing homes that have 1,000 beds available, and then we have 9 sites that are going to be on the way very soon with 600 beds. And this is really, really significant, because our policy from the very beginning has been you can't discharge from the hospital a resident of a long-term care facility who is COVID positive and contagious back to the nursing home, because obviously the fear is that that will infect other vulnerable people. And so what happens is you end up having folks who are infected, they're in the hospital, but they are medically stable and really don't need continued hospital care. These facilities can serve as a step down so that the hospital can safely discharge a COVID-positive long-term care resident to a COVID-only nursing home. Once they clear the disease, then they can go back to their original nursing home. You can also use it on the front end, that if somebody tests positive in a nursing facility, they can be transferred to one of the COVID-only facilities. If they don't need hospital care, this is a place where they could do. So that's going to be 1,600 beds in various parts of the state. We've got a lot of them in southern Florida, and I think that'll be really, really important. You know, if you look at the hospital census for folks with COVID, you do have a number of these folks who are in, who really aren't seeking or needing continuing medical care, but they haven't yet cleared the disease, and so they're not going to be discharged back to the long-term care facility. The facilities we have been accepting a lot of transfers. We're going to continue to do that, but I think that that's really an important tool when it comes to protecting the most vulnerable among us. You know, our guiding principles are, number one, protect the vulnerable. I think we all have a responsibility to look after folks, particularly 65 and up, who we know now are more susceptible to really negative effects from this virus than folks in other age brackets. If you are in one of those age brackets, 65 and up, or if you have significant underlying medical conditions, you really should be limiting your contact outside the home, sheltering as much as you can, and certainly avoiding close contact with people who are not part of your household. This virus is circulating amongst the community in many parts of our state, particularly amongst folks who are in the younger age groups. So you have a lot of 20, 30-year-olds. We're seeing this, a place like Miami-Dade, you have a lot of the young people have gotten it, but it has spread to some of the older population, and I think part of that is family gatherings, friends, things like that in multi-generational households. So folks should be very, very cognizant if you're in those groups to take the necessary precautions. And if you're not in those groups, you have a responsibility to look out for folks who may be more vulnerable to this virus than you. We also are recommending that folks avoid what we've called the 3 C's, closed spaces, particularly with poor ventilation, crowded places, and close contact settings, particularly a close contact setting for an extended period of time. And that's why the number one source of outbreaks has been the home, because you're under the same roof, in an enclosed setting, usually in close contact with family members for an extended period of time. Facial coverings are recommended, especially if you can't physically distance. You have some folks working in certain types of industries where they can't always maintain the 6-foot distance, but that will potentially reduce some of the transmission. So those basic things, I think, will really help us turn the corner. There are some positive signs in terms of, we've heard a lot about the number of cases. We are seeing some positive trends in different parts of the state on positivity that's declined in some key areas. We're seeing some other positive trends on some of the ED visits declining for COVID-like illnesses. But we've got a lot more work to do, but I have no doubt that we'll be able to do it. And it's going to be done by just having a steady resolve, not being fearful, but just understanding what's out there, understanding what we have to do, and understanding that we'll be able to get the job done together. So we're going to be working hard to get the supplies, to get what people need. We're also going to be working hard talking with folks throughout the state about some of the way forward in terms of businesses, schools, and all the important things that are so key to our daily lives. So thank you. Thanks everyone for doing their part. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions.
Yeah, Governor, in the last 24 hours, there's been some, the Department of Health has had to retell labs what results they're supposed to submit, both positive and negative. That's one of about a string of, I'm guessing, 5 or 6 things that have gone awry at the Department of Health, from press releases being recalled to having fights over data with some of the newspapers. Do you still have confidence in Dr. Ripke?
Oh, yeah, no, of course. And first of all, with the lab results, just understand what happens. The law requires for reportable illness that if someone tests positive, it's reported. That's kind of the underlying law. We then said, I think in one of my executive orders, report the negatives too, and that's how we look to see percent positive and try to evaluate. And there were a number of labs who were just simply doing kind of what the default is, which is sending the positives only without sending the negatives. And so I don't think they were trying to be underhanded, those labs. I think that's kind of what they were doing before this started. And so that was identified, and I know they're going to start doing the negatives as well. So I don't think that that was an issue with the Department of Health. I think it was more of an issue with the labs. Yes, sir.
There are some hospitals, I spoke with a hospital earlier, who has been reporting positive and negative case results this entire time, and they've seen discrepancies on that spreadsheet where 1 week their positive cases were missing, this week their negative cases were missing.
Which hospital was that?
It was Lee Memorial, and on top of that, Lee Memorial is listed under 8 different names throughout that spreadsheet. So they're going through trying to figure out, and for another example.
Yeah, no, I know Lee had one entry where they had pretty much only positives, and then they had kind of a bigger entry where they kind of had the negatives and stuff. That may be one of the reasons why Lee has always had a little bit higher positivity than kind of the other places in Southwest Florida. But I think, understand, this is labs using the Merlin system to put it in. So somebody like the Department of Health just didn't put that in. Somebody inputted it that way, and that's just an issue. I mean, we're doing now 90,000 tests a day, so these things are being put in, and it's a huge amount of volume, and so we understand some of the labs, it doesn't always get reported as soon. And that's also why you look at like some of these test results, because sometimes it takes a long time to report them. In some ways, they're kind of a lagging indicator, because if I get results today and I see a case, that's somebody that very well may have been infected 2 weeks ago at this point. And so that's just something to keep in mind. So but we understand that, and that's just kind of the nature of when you have all the data coming in from all these different places, you got to do the best that you can. I think the percent positivity is a pretty good indicator, but you do have to weigh that against the fact of maybe not all the negatives are there. I know some of the major labs, particularly in April and May, they were submitting the positives quickly, and then they would dump the negatives. So if you look at all our testing, the ramp up as we got into May, there was 1 week where there was like way more tests than we had ever done. And then we went down and then built back up. And that wasn't because we did more tests that week. It was because they had been having for 6 weeks negatives, and then they dumped all the negatives. And so I think that day they dumped a bunch, we had like a 0.6% positivity. Well, that really wasn't the true number because of how the data was put in.
So to be clear, you do support Dr.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. That's not his fault for the data entry stuff.
Reported dead from coronavirus today. That totals about 4,500 in the state. Senate Democrats had a meeting today, and they want to know how many more people have to die before you consider scaling back on your reopening plans.
Well, we're working hard every day to prevent not only the deaths, but obviously significant hospitalizations. I think if you look at all the efforts that we've done to protect the most vulnerable and compare that with some of the other states who did different policies and maybe didn't put as much emphasis on that, and we've had people from the Florida Healthcare Association, some of them say, we've been able to save probably thousands of lives when you look at all the efforts to protect our residents of long-term care facilities. And so it's something that we take very, very seriously. We're doing all we can because every life counts, and it doesn't matter whether you're 10 years old, 30 years old, or 90 years old. We want to be there and do the best we can to help folks, particularly those who are the most vulnerable to a nasty virus.
Back to school issue, I'm wondering, do you expect that the Department of Education is going to provide to local counties some protocol when it comes to what happens if a child tests positive? Who gets isolated? How all that, the mechanics, the testing of children. Is that all going to be part of the?
So I think what the department's doing is working with the State Department of Health, and then obviously each district working with their county health department on those protocols. I think as we get through this period in terms of how the testing is going to work, I think we'll have to make some decisions just generally about, because here's, when you test healthy people, especially, which we're doing now a lot, and you go get tested, and you actually are negative, right? But then the lab gives you results 7 days later. You may have been infected in those 7 days. And so in some ways, a negative can be a false sense of security. So clearly, if anyone develops symptoms, we want to have the ability, to do a test. I think that that's very, very useful. I am not sure that just saying, hey, test on the first day of school, oh, you're good. It's not like it's an antibody test. I mean, this is a snapshot in time. And as we know, even though I believe that the younger kids in particularly, seem to be more resistant to this, the fact is, you're probably going to see different transmission as this stuff goes. Yeah, I think the health has got to be very paramount, and I think working kind of with and I don't think it's going to be uniform throughout the state. I think you'll see different localities approach it in different ways.
Do you expect the schools to have the authority to test children, on site?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I mean, typically, I don't know that we would be able to just force you, to take tests. That's why I think if you're symptomatic and you're sick, then that's probably a different question. But I do think that there are probably some issues. I mean, when we do the long-term care testing, we do not require, we offer it to the residents, but you have some that just don't want to be tested. We do not force them to be tested. Now, we do the staff and make them do it, but they're regulated as part of working in these facilities, so it's a little bit different. But I do think that there are significant issues with that, but I think that those are things you're going to have to work out. But clearly, if you're doing it with folks who are symptomatic, then I think it becomes something that's probably going to be easily defensible.
What would you do differently? And what kind of course corrections do you think need to be made?
Well, look, I think that you're seeing that. I mean, remember, when we were going through this in March and April, a lot of folks were focused on, what is being restricted or shut down or all that. And I think if you look at it, most of the behavior was changing before a lot of that was happening. And I think what we've seen recently as the cases have risen, as it's become more of a center stage issue again, is we're seeing changes in mobility data. We're seeing people do the social distancing. We're seeing folks who are vulnerable making the extra effort. And I think ultimately that is what's going to do it for us. I was in Miami-Dade with Mayor Jimenez and a lot of the local leaders, and they've done they were one of the first counties in the country, I think, to close. They were closed for 2 months. They had a very, I think, measured, dip the toe in the water into phase one. They've had things like facial coverings. They've had different things going on. They've pretty much done, I think, all the things different people have recommended at different times. And I think it's really going to be turning the corner with focusing on these key behaviors. And that was kind of the message.
Exactly everything that you need to do right.
Well, we're working every day. So if you look at what we're doing, say, with the testing of the long-term care facilities. We didn't have the capacity in March to test every worker. As we got into May, we were expanding it. We knew we were going to finish going through with that. We knew we had the opportunity to really make an impact on that. We're working very hard to be able to support the healthcare system with all these personnel. It's very, very important. That's the number one. Every person I talk to who runs a hospital, it's all about the personnel. They see traffic, they understand what they have to do. First of all, I think a great story is just how good some of the physicians have done compared to what the results were in March, particularly in other parts of the country. I think they've learned a lot. I think that they're using appropriate treatments that have now kind of been developed and tried over the months, and I think the results are better. So obviously, we wish this could just go away. That's just not how these things work. And so, as people get infected, we hope that people can fight it off and they don't end up needing medical attention, much less hospitalization. But if they do, I think that they're in pretty good hands, and I think that you're in much better shape today going into a hospital in the state of Florida than you would have been in March pretty much anywhere in the country. And I think that they've done a really good job.
Yesterday were talking about is that they felt that they wanted to see a more unified, urgent message from a statewide approach. They mentioned that some people are getting kind of mixed messages. And we heard it again today from from some of the commissioners at the Board of Education, that the education order was confusing to people. Is it a good idea for you to have sort of this one size doesn't fit all approach? And shouldn't you have more of a consistent?
No, first of all, the message with Miami-Dade is consistent. I'm supporting the county mayor in what he's doing. I'm supporting those municipal mayors. I may not agree with them on everything politically, but this isn't really about politics, or it's not about the typical tit for tat. We have a task at hand. When the mayor calls me, we're there to help, and we support, what they're doing. And there should be no, that is very clear. At the same time, the fate of Miami-Dade County does not rest on the fate of what Dixie County does. That's just the reality. And so I think it's served us well to recognize the diversity of the state. Now, in terms of the education, I understand the commissioner has done some stuff on that, and I think that's fine. But at the end of the day, these school superintendents have unique constituencies, and it's going to be a collaborative effort. And I don't think it's going to be just the Department of Education. I think they can recommend, but I don't think they can dictate every decision on this. I think if you talk to parents, I think the view is a little more fractured in terms of what should happen with the schools. I think, probably early June, there would probably been overwhelming say go back, because, we had low positivity, low cases, and things were stable. Now, as you've seen this, I think there's naturally concern about what does this mean for schools? What does it mean for safety? And I think different parents look at it different ways. And I think and that's going to be different in each different school district. You're going to probably have a different breakdown in Broward than you will in some of these other places. And so you need to be able to recognize that. It should not be dictated by the Department of Education. I think they can recommend, but ultimately, we want every school district to do what's best for the kids, for their education, to make sure they have opportunities to do well, and also making sure that the parents have the agency, so that if you have a school district that's offering the in-person instruction which many parents think is very important, if you have parents that aren't comfortable with that they have the ability to opt for distance learning. And so that is what it's got to be. But I can tell you there is going to be differences in how this operates, and actually there should be. Because if you look at Miami-Dade and what they're doing in terms of their epidemic, although we did straighten out the percent positive, I was talking to Mayor Jimenez, I'm like, you always say you're higher than the numbers I have, so I think we worked that out. So they've been about 20%, they were 16% a couple days ago, but they've been about 20%. Obviously we want to get that down, but that's a different profile than maybe some of the other places who, it's not like nobody has seen coronavirus. Every county has seen it, but it is just different. And so I think that's a good approach. I'm hoping that we really work and can turn the corner with Miami-Dade. I feel like most of the rest of the state, you kind of see a positive trajectory that we can get to. In that one, I think in Miami-Dade, a lot of the Broward hospitalizations are people that actually live in Miami-Dade, and they're going to across the county border to be hospitalized there. So let's work understanding that there's a lot of differences and a lot of diversity, and you may see that first day of school look different in say Northwest Florida than you do in Miami-Dade. But quite frankly, I think that's how most Floridians would want it to be. I think that they understand that. But there is a consistent message when it comes to education statewide, and that is parents have the right to choose the appropriate environment for their child. And if they want to opt for distance learning, then they should absolutely be able to do that, and that option should be provided for them. Thank you.
You got to go outside for that? Give a speech? That was the right.
yielded in COVID-19 the reason why we had to remain home. I'm grateful for our county executive who has created a transition plan that has allowed us to reduce our COVID-19 positivity rate and to reduce our weekly number of COVID-19 cases. But what still remains certain is that Prince George's County Public Schools and our county is the epicenter for COVID-19. In conversations, emails with our staff, students, parents, and community members, once Maryland State Department of Education released their guidelines, they shared with me two scenarios that began to emerge of what areas they wanted to see us open in the fall. Those two areas were distance learning, a continuation of what we offered in the spring, or a hybrid model. That hybrid model would be 2 days a week in person for our students and 3 days online, creating a staggered schedule that would allow us to have half of our student population in school during the opening. In June, we administered a survey to our families, teachers, and administrators, asking them about those models that the Maryland State Department of Education released. Our results underscored those conversations that we had. Our community, our teachers, and our administrators favorably wanted a continued distance learning model. In evaluating instructional models for the opening of school, we were guided by 3 main principles. They were safety, equity, and excellence. Safety for our staff and students remained paramount in our decision making, making sure that all students have the tools needed to be successful in the educational experience, and always maintaining an opportunity for us to provide excellent, high-quality teaching and learning opportunities for our students. I spent several months talking, listening to our extensive recovery team, which comprised of 100 staff members, community leaders, parents, and also looked at both models. As we evaluated a hybrid in-person model, significant concerns among our task force revolved around safety and logistics. And for us, we wanted to make sure that by August 31st, we will be able to smoothly implement a hybrid model. Because of the feedback that we received from our task force and community survey, for the 2020-2021 school year, Prince George's County Public Schools will begin our school year on August 31st with a distance learning model. We will offer distance learning from August 31st until January 29th. Our students will experience a full school day of a robust delivery of instruction 5 days a week. Our teachers will have the option to deliver that robust delivery of instruction from their classroom, where they have access to a variety of materials. We will offer small group instruction for special groups, such as our English language learners and our special needs students. And on day one, we will become a one-to-one school district, ensuring that every student has a laptop or an iPad and has Wi-Fi access in order to begin the first day of this robust learning experience. In addition to our distance learning model, we will provide additional student supports. Instructional supports will be offered for all of our students in individual and small groups to help build and strengthen their content in our core content areas, such as English, language arts, mathematics, science, social studies. And what we have learned from the spring is that during this fall, it's important for us to provide social and emotional supports. So our elementary students will have components built into their class schedule that allows us to address this area. And our secondary students will have strategies immersed throughout their content areas. We've also learned that we need to support our families more, and so we will have parent support centers strategically located throughout Prince George's County that will allow our parents to get hands-on experience and access to technology strategies in order to navigate our new instructional delivery model. And school meals will continue to be offered from all 206 schools 2 days a week, similar to the model that we followed this spring. While offering those 2-day-a-week meals offerings, we still will make sure that our students are fed all 5 days. As stated earlier, we will ensure that all of our students who have not received a Chromebook or iPad will receive a technology device prior to the opening of school, and we will reassess families in the need of Wi-Fi access to ensure that everyone is connected on day one. If you're a new family and are deciding to join the Prince George's County Public School family, you will be included in that model, and we will ensure that you too get a technology device. I hear daily the question as it relates to interscholastic athletics, and at this time, we will not be able to implement interscholastic activities that will allow our students to remain safe. We will continue to keep you updated around the state as decisions are made around athletic sports, but we will be offering opportunities for students in their clubs and organizations to still continue virtually. There are some key dates that I want you to jot down and to remember. As stated earlier, our opening of school will be August 31st, and we will continue distance learning until January 29th. That is quarters 1 and 2 of our school system. The next date to remember is December 1. On December 1, we will reassess where we are as a county and make a decision whether it is safe for us to begin a different model on February 1. Parents will have an opportunity from December 1 through December 18th to make a choice of whether they would like to continue with distance learning or if they would like to transition to the hybrid model, which is 2 days a week of instruction in person and 3 days of distance learning. That process will be from December 1 through December 18th as stated, but it would not begin until February 1 and will continue until the last day of school. Of course, we will keep our parents and community informed through this process, and will release to you on December 1 the status of our county and country as it relates to COVID-19. Next steps. We'll continue to review and adjust our instructional plan as needed based on input that we receive from many of our community members and staff members through our telephone town hall, through continuous outlets such as email and phone conversations in order to ensure that we have a robust delivery of instruction for our students on August 31st. We will release our comprehensive draft report next week with extensive details on a student's experience, teaching experience, and ways that we can support our parents through this difficult time. And we will continue to commit to providing timely communication with families through the reopening of Prince George's County Public Schools designated webpage, email, social media, and our robocall system. I fully understand that the decision that has been made to continue with distance learning from August 31st until January 29th is one that is not the perfect scenario. We all want to have our children and our staff back in buildings the way that we used to. Unfortunately, we're not at a time where I feel comfortable that we could move forward with excellent delivery of instruction and keeping our children safe in physically being in our buildings. I guarantee you that we will deliver an amazing, robust distance learning experience that we will be known for across the state of Maryland. Please join me in telephone town halls that will take place tonight for our family and community members from 5:30 to 7 p.m. and our employee town hall, which will take place tomorrow from 5:30 to 7 p.m. You can find additional information on our PGCPS webpage. For updated information, this PowerPoint presentation for today, and then our comprehensive guide that will be released next week, please visit our website. Thank you for your trust in Prince George's County Public Schools, and continue to remain safe.
Would be restricted to certain areas to minimize exposure to other residents. Facilities must also have their own written guidelines in place before any visitation can occur. We know that this has been a trying time for the families of residents in these settings. However, as we've mentioned before, when it comes to some of our state's most vulnerable residents, we have had to take extra precautions to save lives. But with these guidelines in place and with the proper safety protocols in place within these facilities, I am grateful that families will be able to once again be together. God bless them all. Next, as it was reported yesterday, the list of states from which travelers to New Jersey are being advised to observe a 14-day self-quarantine period has been updated. Minnesota, New Mexico, Ohio, and Wisconsin have all been added. And as Delaware has seen a sustained improvement in its public health metrics, it has been removed from the list. We continue to ask everyone who has been in one of these 22 impacted states to practice self-responsibility and good citizenship and comply with our travel advisories. This goes equally whether you are a visitor to our state or a New Jersey resident returning from one of these states. Visit, if you've got any question, visit covid19.nj.gov/travel for the complete list of states and to learn whether you should be self-quarantining. And we further urge you to get a coronavirus test to ensure your health and safety and that of those around you. We have the capacity to provide tests, more than 240 locations statewide, and again, a link to a searchable list of sites is also available at covid19.nj.gov/travel. Our 14-day self-quarantine advisory for those who have come through a known coronavirus hotspot is there for a reason. We have done tremendous work to make New Jersey a leader in the nationwide effort to mitigate this pandemic, and we cannot have this work undone by anyone who was in a known hotspot and may have unknowingly brought the virus back to New Jersey with them. Our work to bring this pandemic under control here in New Jersey continues, and we simply cannot risk more cases coming in from elsewhere. Today, we are announcing 396 new positive test results, and since March 4th, we've reported a total of 176,278 positive results for coronavirus. The daily positivity rate for tests recorded on July 10 was 2.13%. This keeps us among the lowest positivity rates in the entire country, although, Judy, it's up a hair since yesterday, but it's still among the best in the nation. It speaks to our ability, all of us, to meet our needs for testing on a daily basis, and also the great personal responsibility that millions of you have taken. Our rate of transmission currently stands at 0.93, meaning that the rate of spread is below 1, and that means it's slowing. Again, a little bit up from the past couple of days. But the only way we can keep both our positivity and our rate of transmission in the green, so to speak, is by taking the precautions that we have across the past 4 months. That means, again, social distancing, wearing a face mask whenever you're out in public, washing your hands frequently with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, and staying at home if you exhibit any symptoms of respiratory illness. In our hospitals yesterday, there were 923 patients being treated for COVID-19. Again, that is up slightly from yesterday. The number of patients requiring intensive care was 151, about flat, and there were 78 ventilators in use. That's down a hair. As we have noted, the numbers in our hospitals continue to trend in the right direction, and this is by all measures a good sign. But as Judy has noted many times before, the increasing rate of spread of this disease among younger residents, those who may be asymptomatic or whose illness may not proceed to where they need to be hospitalized, that fact remains troubling. This is why we still need to be vigilant. Don't be a virus spreader to family members or others who may be more vulnerable to COVID-19. Look at how we rank here nationally. We still rank way too high in terms of those in the hospital and those dying from this virus. When you wear a mask, you help protect those who are vulnerable from you. Be selfless. Help us push our numbers lower. Wear a mask. And here's why. Today, we have the solemn responsibility to report that another 27 deaths have been confirmed from complications of COVID-19, and that the total toll in our state is now 13,660 confirmed losses of life. The number of probable losses due to COVID-19 has been increased slightly to 1,974. And Judy will give more color, as we have begun to over the past week or so, on the deaths that we report in a given day, what the build-up to that looks like. Again, we are proud of the accuracy, and we, if anything else, are going to err on the side of being conservative on reporting these numbers. But Judy will give you some more color. As we do every time we come together, let's remember a few more of those souls we have lost. We'll begin today in Dover, in Morris County, to remember Orphelia on the left. She came to this country from her native Colombia and was a proud Dover resident known by many throughout the community. She was an avid volunteer for local organizations and took pride in lending her creative talents to projects for groups ranging from Casa Puerto Rico to the Dover Rotary Club. But her greatest joys came at home, spending time with her husband of 37 years right there in front of you with her, Francisco, with whom I had the great honor of speaking yesterday, doing whatever she could to support her sons, David and Jason. And I had the great honor of speaking with Jason as well yesterday, by the way, who works with great distinction at the U.S. Attorney's Office. As they all pursued their dreams, the boys at Seton Hall University, and built their careers. And by the way, she was also loving tending to her beloved garden. As her husband Francisco said, and I quote him, "She did the impossible so her kids could have a better future than she." Francisco, by the way, fought his own battle with COVID-19, and thankfully he is still with us and says he is doing much better. He's here to carry on Orphelia's spirit. And Jason and David are with him too, and together they're going to keep tending that garden in tribute to the woman who tended to their family. May God bless you, Orphelia, and may he strengthen Francisco, Jason, and David. Next, we remember, there is a boatsman, if ever there was one, right there. We remember George J. First, Jr., a longtime resident of both Aberdeen and Waretown. This upcoming Friday, Judy, was to have been George's 100th birthday. He was known, not surprisingly, Pat, by this picture, as the captain by many for his lifelong love of sailing, and as pop to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A Jersey City native, George was a U.S. Army medic with the 113th Field Artillery Battalion during World War II and was awarded the Bronze Star. Upon returning home, George married the love of his life, his wife Margaret, and they would raise a family and be an inseparable couple for the next 34 years before her untimely passing in 1980, only at the age of 60. Professionally, George started in business when he took over his family's insurance business, and he earned a degree in business administration from Rutgers University in Newark at night while working full-time. He would eventually go on to work for the U.S. Postal Service, the Federal General Services Administration, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development before retiring in 1985. Retirement, by the way, didn't slow George down, and he could often be found at the helm of his 33-foot Pearson sailboat until, by the way, the age of 95. George leaves behind his 3 children, George F., Lynn, Madeline, known as Lynn, and Catherine, known as Kathy, and I had the great honor of speaking with Kathy yesterday, and their families, including 3 granddaughters and 5 great-grandchildren. He's also survived by his sister, Jane. A member of our greatest generation, and we're going to speak about several of them today. We thank George for his service to our nation, and we hope he has found a sea in which to keep sailing. God bless you, man. Finally today, we remember another of our World War II veterans, Carlton P. Penn Frost IV. He had turned 99 years old just a few weeks before he passed due to COVID-19. Carlton was born in New Hampshire, but he grew up in Ridgewood and graduated from Montclair Academy before returning to New Hampshire to attend Dartmouth College, and graduated, by the way, in 3 years. He entered World War II as a 2nd lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps, but his service was cut short when he was wounded by friendly fire during a bombing run, and he returned stateside to recuperate. With the war over, Carlton went back to Dartmouth to study at the Amos Tuck School of Business, and then joined his uncle, the architect Jens Larsen, as a draftsman. And for those who have visited the campus of Bucknell University, Carlton was the person who designed the Bertrand Library cupola. After Carlton and his wife Ruth were married in 1947, they chose Bergen County's Hohokus as their home, and he changed careers to enter sales for Becton Dickinson. He coached youth football and baseball teams and helped leading packs of Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. He leaves behind his daughter Lee, with whom I had the great honor of speaking, and his son Carlton, and their spouses, along with his 3 grandchildren, Sarah, David, and CP, 1 great-grandson, and a great-granddaughter who was to be born next month. Lee wanted me to make a point which I think is an important one. She works in the mental health field, and she said telehealth and the embracing of telehealth and what we've done to make that more accessible, available to folks has been a game changer. So Lee, thank you for you and everyone else who works in the field of mental health. What stories his almost to be born great-granddaughter will be told of a life well lived. We thank Carlton for his service to our nation, his community, and God bless and watch over him. 3 more tremendous members of our New Jersey family lost to COVID-19. We say this so often, I think we say it probably every day, Judy, but Orphelia, George, and Carlton are the reasons why we cannot be complacent. They are the reasons why we need to remain vigilant, to wear a mask, and to get tested. Imagine them as your family. Imagine being the one who spreads coronavirus to someone you love, who is more vulnerable to COVID-19 than you are. Imagine that. This is why we need to be smart and selfless. This is why you need to mask up when you leave the house. This is why we cannot yet open every indoor business. We know this virus is deadlier in close quarters and where crowds who aren't taking precautions seriously can more easily spread it. This is, in fact, who COVID-19 wants to latch onto for a free ride. Don't give it that chance. Wear a mask, folks. Be smart. Do it for yourself. Do it for your family, your friends, your neighbor, your community, for all of us. Shifting gears, I have to say last night, yesterday kicked off, Pat, the Last Dance World Series of over 200 high school baseball teams, actually in a club mode, but in an extraordinary tournament that will culminate right here in Trenton on July 31st at 7 p.m. for the championship game. My son Sam and I went to a few innings of Red Bank Catholic against Long Branch. The spirit was incredible. The baseball was really impressive, and that happened up and down our state. I want to give a shout out to my dear friend Paul Sarlo, Senate Budget Chair, but also one of the driving passions behind this and the manager of his own Wood Ridge baseball team. Next, I want to highlight another one of the small businesses who are making it through this crisis, because of the lifelines that we've been proud to offer. Princeton's Monday Morning Flower and Balloon Company was established in 1988 by Georgianne and Kevin Vinicombe, taking their name from their initial service offering, providing fresh flower deliveries to corporate offices every Monday morning. But soon, increasing demand made Monday Morning Flowers a 7-day-a-week business. And today they have 8 employees who help create and deliver floral arrangements, gift baskets, and balloon bouquets to customers in more than 70 zip codes, Judy, across central Jersey, and I suspect that includes yours. Monday Morning Flowers remained open throughout the pandemic, fulfilling online orders and doing curbside pickup when feasible, but their ability to remain open was always a concern. The Federal Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP, offered some assistance, but Georgianne and Kevin were still left with many expenses that the PPP funds could not cover. Thankfully, they learned of their eligibility for 2 grants from New Jersey's Economic Development Authority, and they were able to meet overhead, pay their insurance, and cover additional expenses. Monday Morning Flowers doors are open today, and they remain busy fulfilling customer orders. For a business that delivers happiness, we need them a little bit more today than ever before. So to you, Georgianne and Kevin and your entire team, thank you for remaining optimistic about our future, and thank you for continuing to be a leader in Princeton's small business community. Now, before I close, I want to talk about 3 other members of the greatest generation, one of whom is still with us, and 2 of whom have passed. To the best of my knowledge, neither from COVID, by the way. First one, I just learned this morning that the father-in-law of Assemblywoman and friend Pam Lampett passed. Gordon C. Lampett. She and I have been going back and forth talking about her father-in-law and the inability for so long for folks to visit, where we had no choice. And Judy, just before Father's Day for the long-term care facilities, you were able to offer that outdoor opportunity. Her father-in-law, Gordon Lampett, was a veteran of not 1, not 2, but 3 different American wars: World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. And there are not many folks who could say that. And she lost her mother-in-law, by the way, only a few months ago. So Pam, to you and your husband and your family, God bless your father-in-law. We got another story, and this one I want to pull up, just happened yesterday. So yesterday was Bastille Day. It was also Sheila Oliver's birthday. Happy belated birthday, Sheila Oliver. Pastor Ronald Slaughter, by the way, also his 45th in Newark. And we're also joined today by Jared Maples, Director of the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, who had a birthday last week, but not yesterday. But yesterday's Bastille Day. So I reached out to both the French ambassador as well as their consul general in New York, and lo and behold, their Consul General Anne-Claire Legendre, who will be leaving her post in August, both raised flags, the French and American flags, with Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop, and then took a very special mission down to Ocean City, where she, again yesterday on the basis of Bastille Day, named Francis McCormick a Chevalier Knight of France's Legion of Honor for his exceptional deeds for the French Republic. And there is Francis being pinned by Anne-Claire, a member of the French military there on the left. Francis enlisted in the U.S. Army, Pat, at the ripe age of 22. We take our hat off to him and thank him, as we do Gordon Lampett, for their service to our nation. And Francis, if you or your family are watching, I hope we get a chance to give a socially distant but apropos greeting sometime this summer on the boardwalk in Ocean City. And as I close, I have to sadly acknowledge the passing of another hero, a true American hero, Vincent Hines of Madison. He passed away from natural causes on July 2nd at the age of 95. And he was one of the 156,000 troops who landed on the shores of Normandy on D-Day. A Navy medic, his primary job was to rescue wounded soldiers and bring them back to his ship from the shorelines. By the way, Vincent was 19 at the time. I spoke to his son Brian about his dad yesterday, and we had a great conversation. His heroism and bravery led to his membership in the French Legion of Honor, the highest honor from a grateful France for the efforts on D-Day, which led to its liberation. Last year, Vincent was awarded the Mayor's Hero Award from my dear friend Madison Mayor Bob Connolly, and on Monday, Bob led the Borough Council in a moment of silence in Vincent's memory. Another loss of a generation which gave this world hope and gave us its all. So may God bless Francis, who remains with us, Ocean City's own, and Gordon and Vincent, who have passed, and all of our veterans living and gone before us, and we thank them for their great service to the United States of America. With that, please help me welcome the woman who needs no introduction, the Commissioner of the Department of Health, Judy Persichilli.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. Well, as the Governor mentioned, the Department will be releasing a directive that will allow the parents or legal guardians of pediatric, developmentally disabled, and intellectually disabled residents of our long-term care facilities to arrange for, by appointment, indoor visits with their loved ones. Any resident in a congregate setting, as you know, is at very high risk for COVID-19, and great vigilance must be taken to protect these vulnerable individuals. Yes, we do understand how stressful and heartbreaking it has been for so many families not to be able to visit their loved ones in person for more than 3 months now. Reuniting families, particularly in pediatric long-term care facilities, is a critical step for the mental, physical, social, and emotional well-being of these children, but we need to be vigilant. Given how medically fragile the pediatric population that resides in long-term care facilities are, we have been focused on putting together guidance that not only safeguards the health of these individuals, but includes the very latest that we are learning day by day about this virus. Facilities can only allow these visits if there has been no new probable or confirmed coronavirus cases recorded across a 28-day period, which is 2 incubation periods of COVID-19. Visitors, of course, must be screened for symptoms, which includes temperature checks and potential exposure to COVID-19. A designated area should be established for visitors to be screened that maintains social distancing and infection control standards. If an individual has any COVID-19 symptoms or any possible exposure, they will not be permitted to visit the resident. When staff are transporting the resident to a designated visitation area, a safe distance of 6 feet must be maintained between other residents and staff. Facilities must designate a specific area for visitation in order to limit the visitor's movement around the facility. All visitors will be required to wear a mask, be educated on proper hand hygiene, and practice social distancing with anyone other than their loved one. Facilities are required to obtain informed consent from the resident and the visitor in writing. Those giving consent must acknowledge that they are aware of the potential dangers of COVID-19 exposure and will comply with the facility's policies during the visit. As part of the consent form, the visitor must agree to notify the facility if they tested positive for the virus or have symptoms within 14 days of visiting. Each long-term care facility will set the hours, days, and durations of the visits, and at this time, only parents or guardians are permitted to visit. At least 48 hours before indoor visitation begins, facilities must submit an attestation that they have implemented the requirements of the department's directive. That is, designated areas have been set aside for visitation, ensured that sufficient staff and personal protective equipment are available, and create a system for scheduled appointments. So I encourage facilities to move quickly with their attestations so they can begin these long-awaited visits. Moving on to my daily report, as the governor shared, our hospitals reported 923 hospitalizations of COVID-19 positive patients and persons under investigation. There are 150 Hispanic, 20.2, Asian, 5.5, other 1.8. Of the deaths reported today, 17 occurred in the month of July. 10 of the deaths reported occurred between the dates of April 16th and June 3rd. Hospitals reported 8 mortalities yesterday. At the state's veterans' homes, the numbers remain the same, and at the psych hospitals, we are reporting 1 additional patient testing positive for COVID-19. The daily percent positivity as of July 11th in the state is 2.13%. The northern part of the state reports 1.98%, central 2.01%, and the southern part of the state 2.68%. That concludes my report. Stay connected, stay safe, stay healthy, get tested, mask up. Thank you.
Judy, thank you for, not necessarily every day these days, but most days you and I are in touch with, in fact, you are every day, and I'm most days in touch with our hospital systems